You're not watching this because you're curious about psychology. You're watching this because part of you already knows the answer, and some other part of you just placed a bet 20 minutes ago anyway. That gap, the space between knowing and stopping. That's what this video is about. Not gambling addiction as a concept. Not statistics. Not someone else's story. Your brain, specifically. And why it keeps doing this to you. Here's what nobody tells you about betting. The trap isn't the loss. You can lose $500 and walk away fine. People do it every day. The trap isn't even the win. The trap is something that happens in the half second before you find out the result. Neuroscientists call it anticipatory dopamine. Your brain doesn't release dopamine when you win. It releases dopamine when it thinks you might. The moment you place the bet, before the game ends, before the app refreshes, that's when the chemical hits. That's the feeling. That is what you're actually chasing. Not the money, the maybe. And here's why that's so hard to escape. The brain treats uncertainty as more valuable than a guaranteed reward. In study after study, animals and humans will work harder, stay in the loop longer when the reward is unpredictable. Slot machines were engineered around this finding. So were betting apps. You weren't weak, you were targeted. Let's talk about what dopamine is doing here, because almost everything you've heard about it is slightly wrong. Dopamine isn't the pleasure chemical. That's a myth that's taken decades to correct. Dopamine is the wanting chemical. It doesn't make you feel good. It makes you need to keep going. When a rat's dopamine system is damaged, it can still feel pleasure. It just stops trying. It doesn't pursue food, water, sex, anything. It experiences satisfaction. It just loses all motivation to seek it. This is what's happening to you. Betting doesn't make you happy. It makes you unable to stop wanting the next one. You're not enjoying the experience. You're stuck in a loop of compulsive seeking driven by a chemical that doesn't care. And here's the part that should genuinely disturb you. The dopamine response gets stronger after a near miss than after a win. Your brain, the same brain navigating your career, your relationships, your future, has learned something dangerous. It has learned to experience almost losing as almost winning. The cognitive distinction between the two has been chemically erased. That feeling of, I was so close, that's not frustration. That's your brain's reward system firing at full intensity, locking in the behavior, and demanding you do it again. At some point, the math stopped mattering. You know the house has an edge. You've probably calculated it. You know no system beats a negative return game over time. You know this, and it changes nothing. That's not stupidity. It's neuroscience. The prefrontal cortex, the rational, planning part of your brain, gets overridden by the limbic system when the dopamine loop is active. Your capacity for logical decision-making is literally diminished in the moments you most need it. This is why just think about what you're doing doesn't work. You are thinking. You're just thinking with a brain temporarily reorganized around one single priority. Getting back into the loop. There's a psychological pattern researchers call loss chasing. It's not a character flaw. It's a documented brain response. When you lose, the emotional pain creates an urgency that overrides future thinking. The brain says, this is a threat. Address the threat now. Get back what was taken. The brain doesn't understand that the threat is the game itself. You've made rules. Most people in this situation have. Only weekends. Only sports I actually know. Only $50. The rules feel solid when you make them. By the time you break them, they feel like they were always temporary. Here's why. When the craving is active, your brain doesn't experience the rule as a rule. It experiences it as an obstacle. And the same intelligence you use to construct the rule gets redirected toward dismantling it. It's just this once. It's a special circumstance. I'll reset next week. This one is different. These aren't excuses. They're your brain's prefrontal cortex being conscripted by your limbic system. Your own reasoning ability turned against you. Willpower research has a name for this: ego depletion meeting motivated reasoning. The more emotional pressure you're under, the more sophisticated your rationalizations become. The brain doesn't get dumber under craving. In some ways, it gets more creative. Which means the smarter you are, the more convincing the stories you tell yourself. This is the part most videos skip. It's not just behavior that changes. The physical structure of the brain changes. Repeated gambling alters the density of dopamine receptors in the reward pathway. The baseline level of dopamine drops. Things that used to bring pleasure, food, music, a good conversation, a calm evening, feel flat, muted, like the brightness on your life has been turned down. This isn't metaphor. This is measurable. The brain, trying to adapt to constant dopamine flooding, downregulates its own receptors. It becomes less sensitive to reward across the board. The only thing potent enough to cut through the numbness is the one thing that triggered this change in the first place. This is why people describe feeling like they can't enjoy anything else. It's neurological restructuring, and the brain's own solution, its recovery mechanism, is time away from the stimulus. Not willpower, not shame. Time. The receptors slowly restore themselves. The baseline lifts. Things start to feel real again. But during the period when they don't, that's when the voice is loudest. That's when just one more feels like the only rational response to existing. Here's the honest answer. The brain doesn't forget the pathway. That circuit, once deeply reinforced, doesn't disappear. Years clean, it's still there. A smell, a notification sound, a Sunday afternoon with nothing to do. Any of those can reactivate it. This is not a reason to despair. It's a reason to stop blaming yourself for not being able to think your way out. You were never going to logic your way past a chemical system that evolved to be more powerful than logic. Nobody does. What works isn't stronger reasoning. What works is changing the environment, the triggers, the structures around the behavior. Blocking apps. Telling someone the truth. Changing what Sunday afternoon looks like. Not because you're weak and need guardrails, but because guardrails do the cognitive work your brain cannot do. Knowing this is not enough. But knowing this is the beginning of asking for the right kind of help. There's a version of you that placed a bet today because some part of your brain believes it's solving a problem, recovering a loss, reclaiming control, turning the situation around. That version of you is not broken. It's following instructions from a reward system that was never designed to serve your interests. Hijacked by an industry that spent billions of dollars studying exactly how to keep you in the loop. You were never fighting a lack of willpower. You were fighting a system designed by the most sophisticated behavioral engineers on Earth, running on hardware that hasn't fundamentally changed in 40,000 years. The question isn't whether you're strong enough to stop. The question is whether you now understand what you're actually up against. Because you can't escape a trap you haven't seen clearly. You just saw it.